Hey, the inheritance of $3 million and the position of the clinic's director will go to John, so take care of it, ha ha ha.
Excuse me? What are you talking about?
Well, since John is the eldest son, it does make sense he inherits the estate and takes over as the clinic's director, doesn't it? Finally, it's all ours, ha ha ha. It's been a long time. Now, we don't have to come here every time to spend money.
After the funeral of my father, who was a doctor, my brother and his wife, who hadn't shown their faces at either the wake or the funeral, came to visit. And then my sister-in-law, Emily, started saying these outrageous things. I was shocked. She looked as if she was glad my father had passed away. However, without paying any attention to me, my brother tried to continue the conversation. Pointing at the signboard with my father's name, he laughed and said, "We've got to change this to my name, too."
Wow, it took forever. Dad had been always so energetic even without a break. I kept wondering when he'd finally be gone. And now the day has come for me to become the director.
What? My voice leaked unconsciously. Not a single word of mourning for our father. He's just talking about money and fame. My anger at the two of them reached its peak immediately. My name is Julia. I work as an obstetrician gynecologist at the clinic my father founded. My father saved many women and was involved in childbirth as an obstetrician gynecologist. And my mother supports women before and after childbirth as a midwife. This clinic, cherished by both of them, has been around for nearly 40 years, providing community-based health care. Besides my mother, the midwives, nurses, dietitians, and administrative staff working here are all great people, making for a clinic with a good atmosphere and a positive vibe. Most importantly, my father's thorough examinations were well regarded locally, with many people choosing our clinic for childbirth across 2 generations. Inspired by my father, I became an obstetrician gynecologist. I stand in the field with the desire to take away the patient's anxieties and make childbirth a wonderful experience. When I was a child, it happened many times when my parents suddenly couldn't attend school events or had to cancel weekend plans. People often said I was pitiful, but I never felt that way. My parents were dealing with life itself. Thinking about it, I felt very proud of my parents. However, my brother John didn't feel the same way. He grew frustrated for not being prioritized over work, becoming more rebellious against our parents as he got older. My brother, despite earning his medical license, never took over our father's clinic, and after completing his residency, he took a job at a private university hospital. I also worked at a general hospital for a while after my training, to gain a variety of experiences. So, I don't think it was wrong for my brother to take a job at the university hospital. However, there's something about my brother that I can't forgive. It's that he said to our father, "I never want to work in such a tiny clinic." Despite his rebellion against our parents, he went to college and got his medical license, so I thought he considered taking over the family home as the eldest son. But that wasn't the case. My brother just wanted the prestige that came with obtaining a medical license. As proof, he would always mention having a medical license, basking in the admiration from others and feeling superior with that. However, currently, my brother is not working as a doctor. Though he got a job at a university hospital, he quickly resigned after clashing with his supervisor. Even after resigning and not working as a doctor, my brother probably boasted about having a medical license and having a father who was a practicing doctor. After leaving the university hospital, my brother, who had been job hopping and drowning in gambling debts, brought home Sonia, his supposed spouse-to-be, who clearly seemed to be after his money.
Being the child of a doctor, you could live luxuriously without working. Taking on such a tough job is just foolish, lol. That's why you're not married.
This is what Sonia told me when we first met. Indeed, this job often involves unexpected duties, leaving little time for physical or mental rest. However, that didn't justify dismissing it as tough work and laughing it off as foolish. Sonia, who was after the money, and my brother, obsessed with fame. I thought they were quite a match. Sonia works part-time at a cafe, and my brother has not found a new job even after getting married. Their income shouldn't be much, yet they live a flashy lifestyle beyond their means, seemingly always in debt. I learned about my brother and his wife's problematic behavior after leaving the general hospital where I worked, considering my elderly father, and transferring to my father's clinic a few months later.
I am the son of the director.
While conducting an examination as usual, I could hear a man's shouting voice from the reception area. Both the patient I was examining and I were startled by that voice. I continued the examination, pretending to be calm, but I could hear the noisy sound of someone hurrying and running from behind. After a while, I thought I heard whispering voices, and then the words "cover my debts again, will you?" reached my ears. Could it be? I have a bad feeling. Somehow managing to suppress the anxiety spreading from my chest, I managed to finish the day's consultations. Then, that night, I confronted my parents. The one causing a commotion at the reception today was my brother, wasn't it? When I said that, my parents both made guilty faces. From their expressions, I felt my question was affirmed even without hearing their answer. I heard the word debt. Did my brother incur more debts? You haven't lent him money, have you? Both my father and mother's faces turned even more agonized. Their reactions made me realize my fears were confirmed. When I pressed further, my father began to speak with a heavy heart.
Actually, this isn't the first time. He's come here several times before, asking us to cover his debts.
Hearing that, I was shocked. Despite attending a private university for 8 years, partly due to repeating years and funded by our parents' money, he's not utilizing his hard-earned medical license and is instead drowning in gambling. I felt anger at the fact that a grown man over 40, with a family, is repeatedly incurring debts. Along with feeling angry at my brother, I couldn't help but feel irritated at my parents for not blaming him and covering his debts numerous times before. You should refuse. It's debt made from gambling. Why should you guys have to pay off such money?
It's not that simple. I did refuse at first, but then John continued to make a scene at the reception until I agreed to cover for him.
That's unbelievable.
It's a nuisance to the reception staff and disrupts operations. Above all, considering the patient's anxiety, I couldn't just refuse.
So that's why he came to the clinic instead of home. I felt even more outraged by my brother's despicable thinking for seeing this situation. However, it seemed my parents had feelings towards my brother beyond just anger.
But I think we bear some responsibility for how John turned out because we prioritized our work.
Hearing my mother speak painfully, a sense of helplessness welled up in me. That can't be helped, can it? What would happen to the pregnant women and babies if mom and dad hadn't prioritized their patients? Even my brother worked a bit as a doctor. He should understand that much.
But still, seeing how John is now, I can't help but think there might have been a different way.
Since I'm neither married nor have children, I can't fully understand parental feelings. Therefore, it was hard for me to accept my parents, who seemed to feel a strong sense of guilt towards my brother. It might be one thing if we were children, but we're adults now. Regardless of the past, he should get over and be independent. I can't help thinking that way, and I wish to be so myself. However, to our parents, both my brother and I will probably always be their children. Of course, it might be partly for the clinic, but my parents giving money to my brother also seemed like compensation for the past. Yet, I can't think this situation should continue as is. I attempted somehow to make my brother stop relying on our parents. I've even forcibly taken my brother and his wife outside the clinic to tell them to stop. However, it seems they have absolutely no intention of stopping, and my brother treated me like an unwanted interference, saying, "It's none of your business."
What's wrong with using the privilege of a doctor's child? They's money, so we're saying we'll spend it for you busy folks.
Sonia said that confidently and laughed at me, ultimately unable to stop my brother and his wife's selfish actions. I deeply felt my own ineffectiveness. While harboring such feelings, I continued to be consumed by the demands of daily work. I wondered what I could do for my parents in between my work, but no clear solutions emerged, and time just passed. And then that day came. My father suddenly passed away from a myocardial infarction. There was still so much I had to learn from my father. I wished he could have taught me much more. While filled with regrets and sorrow, my mother and I somehow managed to proceed with the funeral preparations. Many people attended the funeral of my father, who was greatly esteemed. Despite being informed, my brother and his wife did not show up for either the wake or the funeral. After the funeral, the exhaustion from the past few tumultuous days and the reality of my father's absence left a gaping hole in my heart. I wonder if my mother feels the same. Both my mother and I, instead of heading home, found ourselves walking towards the clinic. Upon arriving at the clinic, we just slumped onto the waiting room sofa, zoning out without exchanging any words. But before 10 minutes had passed, the chime rang. I heaved myself up, opened the front door, and found my brother and his wife standing there. "What do you want?" "The funeral's over, don't you know?" Irritated with my brother and his wife for not showing up at the funeral, I couldn't hide my disdain. However, they seemed unconcerned, smirking vilely. As my irritation grew at their creepy smiles, Sonia uttered words I could have never anticipated.
Just so you know, John will be inheriting the $3 million and the position of clinic director, so take care of it, will you? Ha ha ha.
Excuse me? What are you talking about?
What do you mean what? Since John is the eldest son, inheriting the estate and taking over as clinic director is just natural, right? Finally, it's all ours, ha ha ha. It's been so long. Now, we don't have to come here every time to freely spend money.
Sonia said this and chuckled sinisterly. I got confused by her demeanor, almost as if she was glad my father had passed away. However, without paying any attention to me, my brother tried to continue the conversation. My brother laughed and said, "Oh, I have to change this to my name," pointing to my father's name on the signboard.
Man, it took forever. Dad had been always so energetic even without a break. I kept wondering when he'd finally be gone. And now, the day has come for me to become the director.
What? I unconsciously let out a sound. Not a single word of mourning for our father, just talk about money and fame. My anger at the two of them reached its peak in an instant. There is no way I'd hand over Dad's clinic to these people. Just as I was about to raise my voice to kick them out, my mother, standing next to me, started laughing uproariously while clapping her hands. Mom, I couldn't help but be surprised by my mother's behavior. My brother and his wife were also wide-eyed with shock. However, they quickly regained their crude smirks from before.
Have you gone crazy now because now Dad's gone?
Saying so, my brother mocked our mother. Those words snapped me back to reality, and I quickly moved to shield my mother. Don't joke around. How dare you say such a thing? Even as I rebuked him, my brother showed no sign of remorse. However, my mother, for her part, did not seem angry at my brother's attitude. Trying to calm herself after laughing too hard, my mother sighed deeply. Far from being upset, my mother's composed demeanor seemed to irk my brother, who showed his irritation plainly.
Stop laughing and get on with the paperwork, he demanded, urging my mother to hurry.
Saying so, he began to rush my mother. Without minding my brother's rude behavior, my mother simply replied, "All right," and then presented a certain document.
What?
Immediately, I could hear my brother's voice, filled with surprise. Yes, the document my mother presented was the will left by our father. I was also unaware of the existence of this will. From what my brother read aloud, the will clearly stated that the clinic was to be passed on to me, the estate was to be inherited by my mother and me, and also my brother was explicitly excluded from the inheritance. It seems he was excluded from inheriting due to the debts he repeatedly incurred from gambling, which had to be covered. My father had proceeded with the process during his lifetime, and the exclusion was already completed. My brother's hands, holding the will, were shaking. Next to my brother, Sonia's eyes were wide with shock. Seeing their reactions, my mother opened her mouth with a broad smile.
So, that's how it is. We'll handle the inheritance and the transition of the clinic directorship. There's nothing for you two to do, so you can go home now, okay?
Don't be ridiculous. John is the eldest son. The family business should be passed on to the eldest son, shouldn't it?
Exactly. This is invalid. The position of clinic director is mine, and I will absolutely get the inheritance. I will live off Dad's money my whole life.
Sonia insisted first, followed quickly by my brother raising his voice. However, my mother remained unshaken.
First of all, John, who isn't even practicing as a doctor, couldn't possibly become the clinic director.
Huh? Since I have a medical license, I should be able to become the director, right?
Even if you have the qualifications, you haven't practiced medicine for years. Someone like that can no longer be called a doctor and is unfit to be an administrator.
That doesn't make any sense.
At my mother's words, Sonia showed her anger and raised her voice loudly. My brother's face turned pale during their conversation. Then, in a panic, he began to speak.
So, you're saying I can't become the director?
Who would hand over Dad's clinic to someone like you? Seizing the moment, I raised my voice. Though the will had determined I would take over as director, even if it hadn't, I had no intention of handing my father's clinic over to my brother. My loud voice caused my brother to quickly change his demeanor. His previously triumphant tone changed completely, and he looked at me with pleading eyes.
I've been living off Dad's money until now. Without Dad's inheritance, we can't survive. Please, share the inheritance with us.
Dad excluded you from the inheritance because he didn't want to take care of you even after his death. I brushed off my brother's pleas with all the anger I had accumulated until now. My brother became disheartened by the attitude of my mother and me. Sonia, in a state of panic, began to sharply interrogate my brother.
What are we going to do now? There's no point in being married to you if you can't become the director and we can't get any inheritance.
It's too late to say that.
If I had known it would come to this, I would never have married you. Liar. Do something about it.
My mother and I were beyond angry and simply appalled at the marital spat unfolding before us. Please take your quarrel elsewhere. If you insist on staying any longer, I'll call the police, okay? Saying that, I began to expel them both. Perhaps reacting to the word police, the couple left the clinic as if fleeing, still arguing. Several months have passed, but it seems my brother and Sonia are still together as a couple. Each of them seems to be burdened with debts. And even though Sonia knows my brother has been excluded from the inheritance and can't become the director, she seems unable to leave him. I heard they both work from morning till night every day, with their days filled with constant arguing. On the other hand, I reopened the clinic immediately after my father's funeral. I haven't fully come to terms with my father's death, but with patience waiting, I couldn't afford to take a long break. However, I believe it turned out for the best. Taking over as the director and having hectic days, I had no time to dwell on my sorrow, and I was greatly supported by the words of gratitude from my patients. Now, despite being busy, I'm proud to have taken on this fulfilling job and feel joy in being involved in the birth of new life. Not only am I determined to protect this clinic, which was dear to my father, but I also aim to become a doctor like him, whom I always admired, and I plan to continue working hard every day towards that goal.